Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to Lesson 12 of Chef's Apprentice, Learning to Cook Like a Pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is chicken roasted in dark beer. This is an Alsatian-inspired dish. Alsatian cooking mixes French and German flavors. This dish is best served as a third or fourth small plate. It can be prepared with either chicken breast or chicken thighs. In this case, we're using thighs. The finished dish seems like it required a lot of work, but it's actually very easy to prepare. This is also a variation on an earlier lesson. In the earlier lesson, we dredged the chicken in flour, then sautéed it in a sauté pan to brown it. Then we braised it in aromatic vegetables, low and slow. Here, we're browning the chicken in a dish in which it will be served, and we're roasting, not braising. Or actually, we're doing something that's kind of in between, which I'll explain later. The techniques today are portioning chicken, preparing ingredients, cooking bacon, seasoning, browning, roasting, mounting a sauce with butter, and adjusting seasoning. So let's start cooking. Okay, so here we are at the board for Lesson 12, chicken roasted in dark beer. And of course, we'll start first with our mise en place, and the ingredients that we'll need for this preparation. Obviously, the most important ingredient is chicken. And I think I said in the introduction that I was going to use chicken thighs, but I never intended to use chicken thighs. I don't know why I said that. Planning to use chicken breasts today, and the description that comes with the video tells you to use enough to make 8 small plates. I'm only making 3 small plates today in this presentation, so I'm using 1 breast and a couple of chicken tenders that I had. And so the chicken that you need for this preparation is either chicken breasts or chicken thighs, deboned, and of course you could use a mixture of the two. I'm using just the breast today. You'll also need some bacon. We're not going to use this much bacon, but I have a pound of bacon here, and of course I've cut strips in half as I always do, which makes them easier to handle in the saute pan. We'll also need some bay leaves. I have a jar of bay leaves here, and they smell really good too. And we'll need some garlic, and since we're going to slice the garlic today, I'm using this pre-peeled garlic by Christopher Ranch that I get at Whole Foods. It comes in these little vacuum sealed bags, so the garlic lasts longer. And let's see, we'll also need some juniper berries. So here we have juniper berries. You can find these in the spice aisle in virtually any grocery store. And actually, juniper berries are one of the major ingredients in gin, if you didn't know that. We'll also need some olive oil. And of course, we will need our kosher salt. This is Morton's kosher salt. We'll need peppermill with black peppercorns. We'll also need some dark beer. And I like to use Belgian beer for this recipe. This is the Leffe, L-E-F-F-E, Abbey Ale dark beer, brown beer from Belgium. We'll need probably, well, it depends on how many you're making. I'm only going to need 1 bottle from what I'm making today. And then of course you'll need some butter. Now remember, my spell checker changes the word unsalted to insalted, but so we're using today insalted butter for this preparation. So those are all of the ingredients that we're going to need for this preparation. I'm going to break now and get set up with the equipment so I can show you what you need to make Lesson 12. Okay, we're back to talk about the equipment that we will need for this preparation. Of course, we're going to need a cutting board, and we'll need a chef's knife. We will also need a slicing knife. As I've said before, I use Wusthof knives, but there are plenty of other brands out there. We'll also need a bottle opener to open the beer, unless the beer is twist-off, and I'm not sure whether this one is or not, so we have a bottle opener handy. We will need a brush for purposes of brushing the gratin dishes with some olive oil. We will also need a saute pan to saute the bacon. And then we'll need some brown paper to drain the bacon on. And I've mentioned using brown paper before, but what I haven't mentioned is what brown paper to use. You can really use any brown paper at all, like a grocery store bag, but use the part of the paper that doesn't have any printing on it, doesn't have any ink on it. And I think so far I've just used random pieces of brown paper that I've accumulated. But a great way to get brown paper for this purpose is just to buy lunch bags. It's a 100 package of lunch bags, and I'll probably use maybe half of this bag for this preparation today. In addition, we will need to have a mixing bowl to coat the chicken with olive oil, salt, and pepper. And then we'll need some gratin dishes. As I said, I'm going to make 3 dishes today. And you've seen these gratin dishes before. We used them as underplates for the cocottes in an earlier lesson. You might see a piece of, looks like dirt on here. That's baked on. Once a gratin dish has been used a few times, it's going to have things baked onto it that will never, ever come off. So I keep them as get as much off of that as I can, but some of it you just can't get off. We will also need to have just a spoon and a fork for some tasting and for some checking of the chicken later on. And then finally we will need our prep list, as we always do. So that's all of the equipment that we will need for lesson 12. I'll break now and I'll come back and we'll start cooking. Okay, here we are back at the board to start cooking lesson 12. Something I forgot to mention during the equipment part of this video is that we should have an underplate for the gratin dishes. And we did the same thing with the cocottes in a prior lesson. The hot gratin dish is going to be coming out of the oven. It's going to be really hot. We don't want to put it down on the table. We don't want to put it directly down on the placemat. We want to put it down on an underplate. And the underplate should be warmed so that you're not putting a hot gratin dish down onto a cold underplate. So we'll have a warm underplate as well. Okay, now, so let's look at our prep list. First thing on our prep list is to preheat the oven to 450 degrees. So I'm going to do that. Turn the oven on. Okay, now the next thing on the prep list is to portion the bay leaves. Now, in this case, what that simply means is that we have to plan for the bay leaves that are going to go on top of the chicken once it's in the gratin dishes. And so sometimes bay leaves are really big, so you don't want a really big bay leaf on top of chicken that's in a gratin dish like this. So what we want to do is we want to figure, well, what are we going to need? So I figure we're going to need something about like this for each one of these 3 cocottes that we're doing. So we'll get out some pieces, and here we have 1 leaf. There's another leaf there, and there's another leaf there. So these pieces should be, let's take this one instead. These pieces should be good for covering the 3 cocottes that we have with bay leaves. So again, it's not a matter of a precise measurement, it's looking at how much we need to be able to cover the chicken that's going to be in 3 of these gratin dishes. Let's put all of these into the gratin dishes for now, just so we have them in one place. Okay, so then the next thing we need to do is we're going to soak the juniper berries. Now, juniper berries sometimes, usually I think when you take them out of the jar, they're kind of hard. And we want to make sure that they're not, especially if they've been in your drawer for a while, they might be really hard. So how much do we need? Again, we're going to be sprinkling them over the top of the chicken once it's in these cocottes. So we're going to need, like about that many for each one of the 3 cocottes. So I think the amount that we have out here on the board is a good amount. Again, not a precise measurement. You're looking at what is going to be enough to cover your preparation. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drop these into some water. We'll get them out a little bit later and we'll crush them. But for now, we're just going to let them soak for a little bit so they get a little softer. Okay. Stir them up in that water. All right, so we're soaking the juniper berries. So let's cross that off our list. Soaking the berries. All right, we have portioned the bay leaves. Now we need to slice some garlic. All right, so let's see what we have here. Now, again, how much garlic do we need? Well, we're going to want to have a generous portion in each one of these cocottes, and it's going to get sliced. So, let's take several cloves. Say, you know, as I've always said, you can never have too much garlic. So what we're going to do here is we're going to cut off the root end of each one of these pieces of garlic. We could have used garlic cloves off of a head of garlic, but you know, I often crush them to get the skin off. Well, I didn't really want to crush them this time because I want to have nice slices. What we could have done to have nice slices, get them peeled and then make nice slices without crushing them, is to use one of those garlic tubes. I'll show you. Use one of these garlic tubes that will take the peel off the garlic, but we're not going to use that this time because we are using pre-peeled garlic. Alright, so we've cut the roots off of each piece of garlic. Now we're going to slice them, and this time we're not going to be chopping, we're slicing. And remember, again, how to hold them. Try to get the garlic down on one of its flatter sides. Hold your fingers like this with your thumb behind, and slice. If you have fingernails, that really helps. Really helps to keep the whatever it is that you're slicing in position. I don't really have fingernails, so it's not really helping me. But if you do have fingernails, it actually helps you to keep things like garlic or anything small in position while you slice it. I'm going to slice each one of these cloves of garlic. Last one. Alright, now take that over to the side. Get rid of this debris here. Clean off the side of the knife. Alright, next thing on our list. We've sliced the garlic. Next thing we need to do is brush the gratin dishes. So actually it didn't make sense to put the bay leaves in there because I have to brush them with oil. So I'm just going to put those off to the side. And we're going to take these 3 gratin dishes, put a little olive oil in there. Just a little. That's probably what I put in there. Probably put in like a 1/4 teaspoon, 1/2 teaspoon. Then we're going to take our brush and we're going to brush thoroughly. We want to cover the entire gratin dish, all along the sides, down in the corners, the rim. Now the purpose of this is so that it's easier to clean the dish later on. Everything comes out of the dish easier, it doesn't stick to the dish. Also helps to give it some color. Alright, so we have brushed our gratin dishes. Alright, next thing on our list is to prep the beer. Now in this case, that simply means to get the lid off. This beer does not have a twist-off cap, so we're going to use the bottle opener. Also, I want the beer to be room temperature, so I've already had it out at room temperature for a while. So we prepped the beer. Now we need to prep the brown paper that we're going to use for the bacon. And remember what I told you earlier. We take a piece of brown paper, we crumple it up, so it has a lot of hills and valleys, and that helps to that allows the bacon to sit on there and not to heat up the paper and create steam. We're also going to be blotting the bacon with this paper like that. So we'll just keep it crumpled up, loosely crumpled up for now. So we have our brown paper, and let's see. We're also going to need some butter. Now. I have this butter at room temperature. It's actually pretty warm in here, so I am not going to slice this butter until we need it. We're going to need about a teaspoon or so, somewhere between a teaspoon and a tablespoon for each one of these gratin dishes. And we In fact, this is a little too soft, so I'm going to put it in the fridge for now. Now, although we want that butter to be room temperature, we don't want it to be too runny. So I'll leave it in the refrigerator for just a little while, and when we take it out, it will probably be just about right. Now we need to take our juniper berries and crush them. So we're just going to take them out of the water and have one more right here. Okay, then what we want to do is take the side of our chef's knife, spread them out on the board in one layer, and crush them a bit. So the camera clicked off in my sentence, but I just came back on. So what we want to do is crush these juniper berries with the side of the knife. They want to escape if they can. You would too if you were being crushed with the side of a knife, I guess. Let's see what we can, which ones we might have missed here. Okay, and we don't want to make them too, I started to crush this one here. This is a little bit too crushed. We'll still use it, it's fine, but you don't want that. We just want them to be basically to have broken their spherical shape. Okay, there we have our crushed juniper berries. All right, now the next thing on our prep list is to portion the chicken. Now, I intentionally did all of the things on this board that we needed to do before we put the chicken on there to portion it. Always do the chicken last in any prep that you're doing, so that you don't have any cross-contamination. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another board and slice the chicken. So I'm going to take this one and put it aside for a moment. This board, and we're going to do our portioning of the chicken. Now, I want the chicken pieces to be about 3/4 of an inch to an inch in size. This chicken breast has a tenderloin on the bottom of it. This is the tenderloin. It's chicken tender. Take that off. Now you want to, like I said, we want to portion these into pieces that are about 3/4 of an inch to an inch square. And so we're going to cut with the grain of the chicken. You can see a grain if you look at it, basically across the chicken at an angle. Slice it. Let's do these first. Throw them into the bowl. You see the size pieces that we're getting here. About 3/4 of an inch to an inch square. Do our chicken tender that came off the bottom of this breast, and we're going to do the other two chicken tenders that I had for using today. Try to get roughly the same size pieces. Okay, so let's get rid of this board. Okay. Rinse off my hands so we can work clean, although I am going to be pouring some olive oil in here and then mixing it with salt and pepper. So we're going to coat it with a little olive oil. How much? Well, you have to just judge. How much do you need that's going to coat all of this chicken in here, okay? So I just poured some olive oil over it. Now we're going to do the same thing with the kosher salt. How much do you need? Well, you have to just look. You want to have a nice sprinkling cover, okay? And I've put what's I think a fairly generous sprinkling over the top of this chicken, which might not look like too much salt, but it's all going to get mixed in over all of that chicken that's down underneath. And pepper is a good gauge of that, because after you have twisted your pepper on there, you get a nice coverage on the top. Nice coverage on the top. Again, it might look like too much pepper, but what we're going to do now is we're going to mix it up. And the pepper gives you a good gauge of whether you have put a good amount on there, because after you've mixed it all up, you should see that there is a nice sprinkling of pepper over all of the pieces. See, and that's exactly what we wound up with. We have a nice sprinkling of pepper over all the pieces. Now, if you put in roughly the same amount of salt, that means that you have roughly the same amount of salt that's been mixed in with all the pieces, and you have a nice coverage. I think I'm going to add a little bit more of this pepper, though. In fact, I'm going to wipe my hand off first. Okay. Let's put a little bit more on the top. Now, okay, I think that's a good coverage all around. All right, now let's look at our list again. We've portioned the chicken, we've olive oiled and seasoned the chicken. Now we need to saute the bacon. So, what I'm going to do is I am going to break, and I will meet you. Okay, so here we are at the stove. I've already started the cooking process because we've cooked bacon before, and we don't really need to stand here and watch bacon cooking the whole time. I'm on medium heat using a saute pan. In one of the early lessons, we blanched and then we boiled the bacon before we sauteed it. It's a Julia Child method. I think it's a good method. It makes the bacon less salty, but I think it makes it a little bit more rubbery. So I've chosen not to do that in this particular preparation. You could do it if you like. So what we want to do is, as we've done in prior lessons, is we don't want the bacon to get too crispy. We want it to be partially cooked, just starting to brown, and we're really not there yet. Let's give it a little bit more heat. We have our trusty sizzle plate standing by. I think we'll put it directly onto the crumpled paper when we're ready. Now this bacon is going to be cut up, and then it's going to be put into the, I should say on top of the chicken in the, on the gratin dishes. I want it to provide flavor, but I do not want it to provide crunch. Now again, that's a matter of personal preference, and I've said this before. If you want to have that crunchy texture in this dish, you can, but the idea is to have something that is tender chicken, and to have the bacon have about the same consistency. All right. Ooh, I wish you could smell this. It smells great. We're going to leave the fan off for a few minutes, see if we can get away with that. Now this is also, this chicken's going to cook, this bacon is going to cook some more once it's in the gratin dishes and in the oven. But it's not going to be getting sauteed, it's going to be getting the enveloping heat of the oven. So it should stay soft rather than getting crunchy. Okay. All right, I like the way this is looking. It's still kind of floppy, not stiff, like crispy bacon would be. We're going to turn off the heat, and we're going to put the pieces onto the brown paper. I'm going to try to bunch them together toward one end because I want to fold this paper over and blot them with the paper. Okay, so now we have, you see another advantage of the sizzle plate. I took that off the heat. I put that sizzle plate down on that burner after the heat was turned off, and it can handle the heat of that hot burner. We're just going to press those down on that, press that down there to get some of that, soak up some of that bacon grease. Okay, so now we're going to take this back to the board, and we'll break, and I'll meet you back at the board. Okay, so here we are back at the board. We've got our bacon here. I'm going to tear this paper and use it to blot this bacon a little bit more. Get some of that grease off there. You can see how well this brown paper absorbs that bacon grease. Just blot as much of that extra grease off of there as we can. Okay, now I'm going to take this bacon and we want to chop it coarsely. Now you can either take each piece, cut them kind of like this into strips, and then cut them again, or you can just take it and turn the bacon a little bit, and you can get pieces that are roughly the right size. I'll show you that again. Cut it like this, turn it, cut it, turn it. You've got all pieces that are roughly about the same size. And that was quick, very quick. We'll put that off to the side for now. All right, let's check our prep list. We have sauteed and blotted the bacon. We've cut the bacon. Now we want to fill the dishes with the chicken. So let's move this out of the way. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to divide our chicken among these dishes. I think the amount that I have cut up here is a little bit more than what I would serve as a small plate. This is kind of somewhere between small plate size and entree size. But again, you just have to judge what you're making and how many, if you're making small plates for your guests, you just have to judge how many small plates you have and how big they are, so that your guests are getting roughly the equivalent of one regular meal if you're serving them a collection of small plates. All right, so I think we have roughly equal portions in each one of these dishes. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put these into the oven, and we're going to roast them at, remember we preheated at 450 degrees. We're going to roast them 5 minutes on one side, and then we're going to check them. And assuming they're looking good after 5 minutes on one side, we're going to turn the chicken and do 5 minutes on the other side. So I will break, put these in the oven, and then we'll come back after they've been roasting at 450 for 5 minutes. Okay, the alarm sound just went off, so let's check on our chicken. Okay, so it's been in there for 5 minutes at 450 degrees, and I don't think that it's golden enough. So we're going to put it back in for, say, another I'm going to say another 5 minutes. Now, why is it that I judged that it needed 5 minutes more? I didn't want to leave the chicken out of the oven while I explained it, but basically you could still see pinkness of the chicken around the edges and kind of down the sides of the pieces, and no goldenness on top. Now, if it had been more golden on top, I would have said we'll only do like another 2 minutes. But I think we need another 5 minutes so that we start to get some golden color. So I'll go off camera and I will come back when the alarm sounds. Okay, our timer just went off, so I'm going to pull them out. Okay, so they're looking very nice actually, but after the timer went off at 10 minutes, I checked them and they really needed more time, so I put them back in for another 5 minutes. So this is 15 minutes at 450 degrees. Now, I've done this preparation many times when 5 minutes was enough, and then I turned them and I did them for 5 minutes more. This time, the kitchen gremlins were here, it took longer. You know, it really, as I've said before, it depends upon whether you're whether your gratin dishes and the preparation inside of them is at room temperature when you start. It depends upon whether your oven is really 450 degrees, and so, you know, there's variables. So this time it took 15 minutes at 450 degrees, and they look very nice. And you can see actually why, once you get some baked on stuff inside of a gratin dish, it may not come out. Anyway, all right, next step. Next step is that so we'll check our prep list. We have filled the dishes. I forgot to check off earlier that we had preheated the oven to 450. And so now we have roasted the chicken in the gratin dishes. And now what I want to do is reduce the heat of the oven. And it was, let's see, it was at 450 degrees, and I'm reducing the heat. I've reduced it down to 300. Now, you can wait until you think it's dropped to 300. Some ovens will tell you when it's dropped to the other temperature. Mine doesn't. So what I did is I opened the door. And so I'm going to leave the door open for, you know, maybe another minute or so while I work on this preparation, and then I'll put it back in, and the temperature will probably be down to about 300 by that time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the beer. We want to have it come up, you know, come up about halfway up the chicken. We don't want to cover the chicken. Okay, so it's already starting to bubble because those gratin dishes are so hot. I'm just going to put another touch in each one. Now these are going to be cooked uncovered. Why uncovered? Well, so that the alcohol can evaporate. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the berries. This is the juniper berries. Let's add the bacon first. This is the bigger thing, the bigger ingredient of these three things. I mean, in terms of its size, the size of the pieces. We're going to scatter this bacon over the top. We had just a good, perfect amount to scatter over these three gratin dishes. I just closed the oven door. Now we're going to scatter the garlic slices over the top. Now I'm going to explain to you what we're doing in technique after I put these back in the oven, but I do not want to lose too much heat explaining it with them outside the oven. Now we're going to garnish them with the juniper berries. We have just what I think is the right amount to get a nice coverage on all of these. Then we're going to put some bay leaves on top. And I'm going to place these a little bit more particularly so that we have nice coverage rather than just trying to scatter them. I'm actually placing them on top. Remember, we had some smaller pieces. Okay, so we have we've reduced our heat to 300. We've added the beer, the berries, the garlic, the bacon, and the bay leaf. So a lot of bees: beer, berries, bacon, and bay. Now we're going to put these back in the oven at 300 degrees for 20 minutes, and then we're going to check them at that time. So they are back in the oven. I'm going to set my timer on my smartphone for 20 minutes. Now, what is it that we are doing here? In an earlier lesson, we did braising, which is low and slow, a relatively low temperature, usually around 300 degrees. Slow meaning you cook for a pretty long period of time. And that depends on how much quantity you have, and also depends on how tough the cut of meat is. If we were doing something like a short rib, we'd want to braise for, you know, an hour, maybe more, maybe 2 hours. If you're doing chicken, chicken's inherently more tender than a short rib, so it doesn't take as much time. here we're doing a combination of two different oven techniques. One is roasting, and so now you've heard of roasting, you've heard of baking. Well, what's the difference? Well, basically they're the same thing. Baking is loosely considered to be something where you put it in the oven and you're not cooking it in any liquid. Roasting is usually loosely considered to be where you're putting something in the oven and you're cooking it with some kind of liquid. Very loose definitions. There's really very little difference between, if any difference at all, between baking and roasting. So what we did was, and I've been told I should have some more FaceTime, so we'll give you a little more FaceTime as I'm explaining this. What we did is first we roasted the chicken in the oven for 15 minutes at 450 degrees without any liquid except the olive oil that was on the so the camera clicked off while I was talking. It must not have liked this angle. Anyway, we roasted the chicken and you could call it baked because we really didn't add any liquid. Then we added liquid and we reduced the temperature. So you could call that braising, except it's gonna be in there 20 minutes to check it. Maybe after that, maybe another 10, maybe 20 minutes, 40 minutes total at 300 degrees. You know, that's kind of like borderline braising. So we've done a combination of baking / roasting, and we're also doing a kind of a borderline braising, both in the same dish. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to cross, well, no, nothing to cross off yet. I will go off camera and I will come back when my timer sounds. Okay, so the timer just went off. Let's see how we're doing. Oh, they are smelling good. And so it's been 20 minutes. They're looking really good. What I'm going to do is add a little bit of the beer to this, just to pour it over the top, because I see some has evaporated. Of course, we don't want it to be, it doesn't need to be like a, you know, soupy, but I don't want it to get dry. I don't want it to dry out and evaporate totally. Okay, so now we're going to put it back in for 20 more minutes at 300 degrees. And I will come back. I will set the timer and I will come back on camera after 20 minutes. Okay, we're back at the board and the timer is just about to go off. Just now. Okay, so let's see how we're doing. Okay, they look beautiful. Let's stop this guy here, stop the timer. All right, so we have, we roasted these for 20 minutes and then we turned the pan and we roasted them for 20 more. Sometimes you'll hear someone say, hear a cook say, you'll roast it or you'll saute it, then you'll turn it. I didn't turn the meat over. I turned the pan because it can be hotter on one side of the oven or hotter in the front or the back. So I turned the pan for 20 minutes. So we roasted for 20 minutes at 300. We turned it for 20 minutes. Now, what we want to do is see how we're doing. Let's take, I'm going to say this one is going to be mine. So I'm going to take a little corner out of there where you can't really see it, so that when I serve it, no one will see that I actually took a small part out of mine. Oh, good. The chicken is tender, fall apart tender, perfect. Now what we want to do is remove the bay leaves. You do not want to serve anything with bay leaves on it or in it. So remove the bay leaves. Okay, now check the list. It says remove bay. Now we're going to mount with butter. Now mounting can be used in a couple different ways. Mounting is a term meaning that you take butter and you swirl it or you whisk it, say for example with a whisk like this. You whisk it into a sauce just before you serve it. It's also used sometimes to mean simply that we're going to add it on top and let it
melt into the dish. And that's what we're doing here. We're taking, as you can see, probably about a half of a tablespoon of butter off of this stick. It's room temperature butter. Although remember, I put it back in the fridge earlier. I took it out, let it get back to soft room temperature. I'm going to stick that back in the fridge now. And then we want to adjust the seasoning. Now what I want to do here is just go back to the one again that's going to be mine. Just take a little taste to see. You can taste that beer taste. It's kind of bitter. But when I tasted the chicken before, the seasoning seemed to be fine. I'm just going to give a fresh grind of pepper over the top. Just more for appearance really than for taste. And I have warmed the underplates, as I mentioned earlier. So let's get an underplate. Okay. So we're going to take one of these and put it onto the one that I'm serving myself. Put that onto the underplate, and there we have it. There we have it. This is lesson 12, chicken roasted in dark beer. Now, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to put these back in the oven while I do the recap, so that the butter will melt better. Or I should say, so the butter will melt more fully. So let's put these back into the oven. Good. Now we'll check our prep list. We prepped the butter and we sliced it. We had the warm underplate. So just for the recap, we portioned chicken today and we prepared the other ingredients. We sauteed the bacon. We seasoned the chicken. We browned it in the gratin dishes. Then we roasted it in the oven. Could also call it baked. And then we did something that was kind of like a braise. And then we mounted butter at the end, and we checked to see if we needed to adjust the seasoning, which we did not. So that is the conclusion of lesson 12. Let's see how it looks if that butter's melted. So the butter has melted into it nicely. So that is the conclusion of lesson 12, chicken roasted in dark beer. Please remember to subscribe to this channel and enjoy this dish.